a minute to join us here. Here's my question for you, those of you that are on the call right now. We sort of did this calories, macronutrients breakdown, what percentage split, whatever. Nutrition, there's a lot to nutrition, right? And ultimately what it comes down to is that it's really individual. There's lots of ways to achieve weight loss. Ultimately, anything that puts you in a calorie deficit will do that. But everybody has different experiences, backgrounds, beliefs, preferences, tastes, lifestyles, right? So while it's as simple as you need an appropriate calorie deficit in order to lose weight, it's also very variable because every individual is going to have a different structure around what that means, right? So the idea for us is that we're starting off by looking at kind of the simple facts about nutrition, understanding like the science of the human body, but we're not necessarily diving into nutrition coaching. We're not necessarily looking at all the myriads of options for helping people. We do have a discount for anybody who wants to do the Precision Nutrition Level 1 coaching program. That's like the best, most comprehensive next step
I
besides
actually signed up like 10
degree
days ago.
nutrition. Say that again?
I actually signed up like 10 or 2 weeks ago, and I just got the textbook in the mail today.
Yeah, awesome. It's a really awesome course. I've done it twice. I did version 1 and I've now done version 4. I like it a lot. There's no way that we can give you that same amount of content in 2 days, but it's like we're sort of setting the stage. I'm sure Josh mentioned this, but with a personal training certification, there's a limited amount of stuff that you're allowed to talk about. And obviously being able to offer more help than that to clients can be really beneficial, but it does require more education, right? So we're sort of looking at the basics here. However, that being said, what are a couple of the recommendations that you might make for someone within your scope of practice around how to look at nutrition for achieving, let's say, because it's the most common request, let's say for weight loss? Say, if you want to give me one coaching suggestion that you might give a client.
Because definitely I recommend it has to be a calorie deficit, of course. And for me, it's like what I usually do for myself is I just keep the protein and the fat same, and I just cut down the carbs a little bit. And yeah, it works for me. It's probably protein is very crucial when you're trying to lose weight. So because you don't want to lose any muscles, so of course keeping the protein at least, I would say 1 to 1.25 grams per pound, and watching your carbs. Sugar is very important, sodium, this kind of stuff, like processed food.
So if we were to take what you just said, like say we start working with someone and they want to achieve some weight loss, it might be a good place to start to say, well, hey, keep all of your protein the same, keep all of your, fruits and vegetables, but maybe look at your portion sizes of like the rice, the potatoes, the bread, like if you eat sweets, right? Or even what you're drinking, like let's say you drink a glass of juice in the morning. You don't want to make too many changes at once, but maybe one of the things to do would be looking at just like
decreasing
a little
them
bit less sugar or a little bit less carbohydrate. Yeah. Good. I like that. Awesome. Regan said chew slowly. That's a great one. And then drinking more water can also be really good. So I think what I like to talk about from the perspective of coaching nutrition is when we're trainers, when we're working with somebody new, I think I say this at the beginning of the program. I say, like, sometimes it's hard to be the person that knows a lot of things, because then what you want to do is tell people everything you know. But even for us, for wherever we are now, we had to learn how to do what we do, or maybe we're still learning, right? But we didn't like all of a sudden just wake up one day and we're like, this is how to eat. It takes time. So sometimes what's challenging about nutrition is when you're a trainer, chances are you probably know a fair bit because you're interested in it. But the coaching aspect of nutrition is like, okay, let's start really slowly, because we want to do something little that's manageable, that's sustainable, that we can see works, and then we want to build on that. Versus, like the flip side of it is like, okay, here's an eating plan for the next 16 weeks. You're going to do a figure bodybuilding show. This is exactly how you have to eat, right?
Mhm.
What we've seen in the research is anything that's really sort of like a complete overhaul, anything that's very restrictive, people tend to have a really hard time following it for more than a couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks at the most, right? And if we sort of tell people that that's the way to do it, then it can be really frustrating and ultimately kind of alienating to be given that sort of style of coaching, because then it's like, there's a funny sweatshirt that one of my clients gave me way back in the day, and it said, if at first you don't succeed, try doing what your trainer told you to do in the first place. And that's funny, and it's true, but also the issue is kind of, if I told you to do something that was really unmanageable, then I didn't actually really help you, right? So that's kind of what I like to think about with nutrition coaching. Is it's not about me, it's not about what I know, it's not about what I do, it's about you. What do you want to work on? What do you think you can do? And let's just start from there, right? So when I think about how I coach nutrition, I ask a lot of questions. And I'm basically just helping my client figure out for themselves what it is they want to do. I don't really say very much because I have no idea where my belief, my experience, my ability lands in relation to them, right? So if I can say anything about, hey, I know this is like a simple kind of quick 2-day look at nutrition. If I can say anything about how you take that forward, if you're not going to do additional nutrition certifications right away, then I would say be open-minded, be agnostic, be curious, be a coach. Don't be a nutritionist, don't be a dietitian. You're not giving instructions. It's more so you're just trying to help steer someone in the right direction based on what they think is available, right? And that kind of goes in general for being a trainer, especially if you're a younger trainer. You want to sort of think about how to facilitate success instead of just hand out, a bunch of rules when you're dealing with adults, right? Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. That being said, we do recommend logging food. For most people, that's a great strategy, and it helps them learn. There are certainly people where that's not going to support them. It's maybe it's too focused on numbers in a way that's not beneficial for them. So we recommend it, but it's not a requirement, right? Like, we're always going to listen to the person that we're working with to make sure that what we're talking about is helpful for them. So we do recommend logging food because a lot of people just don't know, right? They don't really know what they're eating. And if you don't know and you make a bunch of changes, well, how do you know that you're even changing the right thing? And how do you know that the change you're making actually matches what your goals are, right? So we do really like logging food. And what I usually say, especially when I'm doing like the onboarding portion of stuff, what I usually say is, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. I say that about a lot of things, but especially nutrition. You might have someone that's actually eating pretty well, so that if you just hand them a bunch of changes, that might actually not work out, right? Sometimes they need to eat maybe a little bit less. Sometimes they actually maybe need to eat a little bit more. Sometimes they need to eat a little bit more of the right things. And so if you don't know what they're currently doing, you don't really know what the right change is to make. And one of the best ways to figure out what they're currently doing is to write it down or log it or take pictures of it or whatever, and then start to make little changes from there, right? So hopefully we got a good dose of that on the initial chat about nutrition. What we're going to do today is carry on from micronutrients. and get into a little bit of sort of nutrition timing, a little bit around supplements, a little bit about sort of nutrition for training. And in general, if this is something that you want to be able to do with your clients, I do recommend extra education, because this is a nice quick little overview. But ultimately, there's lots more to learn when it comes to nutrition. So let's dive in, and that way we can make sure we save some time to get started on some of the business stuff as well. So the first thing we look at is water and being properly hydrated for the micronutrients. 60 to 70% of body weight is water. And if you remember, when we looked at the in-body measurement, we get a weight and then we get a total body water number. So for example, if you were to take your own body weight and you were to multiply that by 0.6, then it would sort of tell you what the amount of water should be in your body. So if you had someone that's 165 pounds and you multiply that by 0.6, you would want their total body water number to be at least 100, because that's going to be 60%. So that's something that we can do with the impedance testing. And often we look at helping someone get better hydrated as part of the first sort of change we make in nutrition. Why would being properly hydrated help with achieving weight loss? Why would that be something that we might recommend?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, so we often recommend that our clients drink more water. Why would that help someone achieve weight loss?
They feel fuller, full.
Sure. Yeah. So like sometimes people think they're hungry, but actually they're thirsty. So that would be one thing for sure. Regan also says it helps with digestion. That's true. So from the first set of slides, if we're sipping water as we eat, it helps mix the saliva with the food and it helps promote better digestion. So that would also be the case. And I would also say that sometimes when people don't really have a healthy diet, they can get maybe constipated. And if they're not eliminating on a regular basis, then like digestion and elimination are supposed to be a process that's fairly consistent, right? So if we get really dehydrated, it can make it harder to eliminate properly. And then that sort of backs things up and it affects digestion. So those are sort of obvious reasons around weight loss. And then sort of the additional things to look at, like if we go look at the table around dehydration, like even just 1 to 2% of body mass down means that we're thirsty. We might experience a loss of appetite, dry skin, decreased plasma volume. So that can make it harder for the heart to pump blood because the blood's getting a little bit thicker, right? We would also see like decreased cardiac output, a loss of muscle strength, a loss of power. And then even when we're working out, we see increased heart rate. So when we're dehydrated, we're actually forcing the body to work a lot harder to function. And then that means we're wasting energy there instead of being able to dedicate that energy towards performance, right? At around 7 pounds of water loss for someone who's 150 pounds, we would see sleepiness, headaches, nausea. It might even feel like a hangover, right? Because a hangover is essentially being really dehydrated. And we might even see someone stop sweating. And so what that means is they're not going to be able to regulate their temperature very well. So especially if you have someone exercising in the heat, if they stop sweating, they're going to get overheated. And then when we get to 10% of body mass loss, we can get muscle spasms and skin shriveling and vision blur and even death. So it's possible to have cause of death be sort of severe dehydration. Okay, so when we look at hydration, then, we want to make sure people are drinking the right amount of water. Well, what is that? We kind of have to keep in mind that the fastest rehydration rate based on how much fluid we can absorb is about 1 liter per hour. but the highest sweat rate recorded during endurance activity was actually 3 liters per hour. So if we show up to a workout slightly dehydrated and we're drinking water, we might be sweating more. It's actually a little bit harder to catch up. So it's one of the reasons why we want to be hydrated before we even start. So then when it comes down to knowing how much water to drink, the average human needs 12 cups for hydration, plus an additional 4 cups per hour of exercise. So I like to use a water bottle or even a measuring cup. So like, for example, this little mason jar right now, it has 250 milliliters of water in it right now. So that's 1 cup of water. And the line up closer to the top, that's 500. So that would be 2 cups. So like inside of 1 hour of intense exercise, I should actually drink 2 of these. So if I got a water bottle that was 1 liter in size, then I could drink 1 of those during exercise. So it's sort of like a fun little coaching trick when you have someone come to work out. If you look at their water bottle, or if you look at the container they're drinking out of, it sort of gives you a sense of how much water they're consuming, how much of that they should drink, right? So I might say, if you drink 1 of these right now, fill it up again and drink it like on your way home so that you're getting that extra one liter of water. Now, when we look at the 12 cups that humans need on a day-to-day basis, we do get 1 cup of water via metabolic processes, right? So that means there's chemical reactions happening in the body that actually produce water. So brownie points, if anybody can think of what that process is, I'll give you a hint. It's one of the energy system processes. So out of the 3 energy systems, 1 of them produces water as a byproduct. Can you think of which one it is? So it would either be the ATP PC system, or it would be the lactic acid system, or it would be the aerobic. Regan's guessing lactic acid. No. So Regan, in that one, the byproduct of the chemical reaction is actually the lactic acid. That's one of the reasons why that energy system doesn't last for as long, because the more we use it, we're producing lactic acid, and that starts to get in the way of the body being able to do what it needs to do. So it's actually the aerobic system, right? Remember, in the presence of enough oxygen, the body uses glucose and oxygen to make ATP, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide, which we breathe out, and water, which we use. So when we're just sort of sitting around day to day doing our low level stuff, the body actually produces about 1 cup of water, and we can use that for some of the things that we need to use water for. Okay. So then in addition to that 1 cup via metabolic processes, we also get about 4 cups of water via food intake, and that's usually coming from things like fruits and vegetables. So if you eat cucumber, celery, watermelon, lettuce, right? All of those kind of have water in them. So then what that would mean is on top of those 5 cups, we'd actually need to drink 7 cups of water per day. And then that would mean that we have our tissues, our body fully hydrated. Okay. So there's usually a question on the exam about that, whether it's how many cups of water you need to drink, or whether it's how many cups of water you need to drink during exercise. There's usually a question about that. Now, from there, if we exercise at hot temperatures or for lots of intensity, then the daily requirement for water is actually 16 cups plus another 4 per hour of exercise. So we talked about back in the cardio section that one of the adaptations to doing a lot of exercise is actually to hold on to more water. We actually increase the plasma volume for someone who exercises and sweats a lot. So if we have people that are endurance athletes or they're working out where it's pretty hot, they're going to sweat a lot more. The body kind of starts to get to know that and then tries to hold on to more water. So in that case, that person would need to be drinking additional water each day. Okay. From there, we want to take a look at alcohol, because obviously that's something that our adult clients are potentially going to be consuming, and it will affect their nutrition. Number one, based on the fact that they're consuming calories, but number two, alcohol is a substance that the body does not gain nutrition from. It's a substance the body actually has to process and eliminate. So for example, when you feel buzzed or drunk, that's the amount of alcohol in your bloodstream that the body cannot metabolize. So that's why you feel a little like, woo, right? Whereas if you were drinking a small amount and your body was able to metabolize it, you wouldn't end up feeling anything. So with alcohol consumption, we sort of have to understand like what moderation is, right? We say all things in moderation. So consuming more than 5 drinks in 1 week is considered to be above moderation. And so if we're consuming more alcohol than that moderate amount, over time, we start to see liver compromise, increased cancer risk, increased belly fat. We see changes in sex hormone production, so things like testosterone and estrogen. And ultimately, we start to see nutritional malabsorption. So if you think about it, the analogy that I like to teach my clients is if you've ever been to Washington, D.C., when the president leaves the White House, there's like a big motorcade. So there's like 2 armored limos, there's a bunch of armored vehicles, there's a bunch of cop cars, there's a bunch of policemen on motorcycles, there's even a helicopter flying overhead. And so when the motorcade leaves the White House, they've got all the streets blocked off and the president goes wherever they need to go, right? If you're the traffic anywhere else in Washington, D.C., where you're trying to go gets disrupted. So the way that we sort of make this analogy is that alcohol is like the president in the motorcade, and the rest of the food that we're eating is the regular traffic. So if we consume alcohol at the same time as eating food, the body prioritizes metabolizing alcohol, just like the traffic has to stop for the president to get through, right? So the body's trying to metabolize alcohol because it's kind of a bit of a poison, and the body wants to try to get rid of that as quickly as possible. And therefore it affects how we absorb the rest of the calories of the rest of the nutrition, right? So if we wanted to focus on optimal digestion and optimal nutrient absorption, then we don't want the president driving through at the same time. So with clients that like to consume alcohol, reducing their intake, or even if they're willing to stop drinking alcohol for a while, that can actually really help speed up weight loss, because then the liver just gets to focus on converting fat into glycogen as we have a slight calorie restriction, instead of the liver having to focus so much on metabolizing the alcohol. So that can be a fairly simple way of stimulating some weight loss. We don't even necessarily have to change too much about how we're eating. If we just reduce or eliminate consumption of alcohol for a little while, that can be helpful. Okay, so it's a suggestion. Not everybody's going to be willing to do that. But even just reducing their intake can really help. And maybe that helps them get results and get healthier and give their body a bit of a break. Okay. So from there, we get into looking at the micronutrients, so the vitamins and minerals, and there's 2 main categories. We've got water-soluble vitamins. So they're required for most body processes, but we have limited storage capacity. So things like the B vitamins, vitamin C, and folate, we basically have to take them in daily because the body can't really store them very well. What that means is we can become deficient in them quite quickly. And so if we don't have enough of the vitamins that we need, then some of the metabolic processes that require those vitamins aren't able to function optimally. So B vitamins tend to have a relationship to things like energy. Vitamin C definitely has a relationship to immunity, but then also connective tissue health, right? So if we want to have healthy connective tissues, there's a certain amount of vitamin C that we need. And so those are the water soluble vitamins. On the flip side, we look at the fat soluble vitamins, and that's A, D, E, and K. Again, required for a lot of body processes, but these ones get stored in fat. So if we consume a bunch of vitamin D and we don't use it all, the body can store it in fat and hang on to it for when we need it next. What this means is deficiencies take longer to develop, but there's also a toxicity risk, especially with aggressive supplementation. Because if I can hang on to the extra and I'm taking too much, then I can be building up too much of the extra in my tissues. Something to think about then with sort of rapid weight loss is that all the things that we store in fat, like vitamins, but also like sort of harmful toxins and chemicals, we store those in fat as well. If all of a sudden we lose a lot of weight really quickly, we're actually sort of throwing those vitamins and toxins back into the body quickly, and it can cause some discomfort or some health issues, right? So when it comes to supplements, we from a personal trainer scope of practice perspective, we want to be really careful to follow the labeled instructions, and we want to be really careful to only recommend the appropriate amount of something. We don't want to say, oh, take extra, it's fine, because we don't have the knowledge sufficient to be able to change dosing recommendations. Okay. The minerals kind of often get thrown in. Like I take a daily multivitamin, and it's actually got vitamins and minerals in it, so they can sometimes get lumped in. And again, these are required for most body processes. They do carry a toxicity risk. Again, so if we look at a couple of these, we think of calcium as being really good for bones. Things like magnesium, potassium, and sodium, those make up electrolytes. Those help us absorb water. Zinc is really important for production of testosterone. We've heard of iron in relation to anemia. So if someone's low in iron, they can feel a little bit tired because it affects how hemoglobin transports oxygen through the body. Iodine and selenium are really good for thyroid health, so they help with metabolism a little bit. So in general, again, when it comes to being a trainer, a really safe and easy recommendation is just a daily multivitamin, because we get all of these things from our food. We just don't know how much. And if we take a vitamin, then it's sort of like we get the base minimum amount that we need every day, and that helps us stay healthier long term. Okay. So we're going to come into talking a little bit about deficiencies and supplementation, and this part is kind of important because I think sometimes the challenge or the frustration is, if you're on Instagram or watching YouTube videos, or you go to the grocery store or the supplement store, it's like everyone's telling you something different, right? And I think this happens when you're a trainer a lot in general. Your client will ask you, well, my uncle did keto and he lost 30 pounds, or, I saw this magazine at the grocery store checkout and it said that, bread is bad for you. And my neighbor is selling these shakes, and she says you take a shake for breakfast and a shake for lunch, and then you eat your normal dinner, and that's like the best way to lose weight. And so I just don't know what to do, right? So I think what's important, again, with a base level CPT is to be able to say, well, this is how the human body works, and these are sort of the simple facts. And then after that, we have to go consider like what's going to work for you, right? Because I think if we say this recommendation, this recommendation, this recommendation, this recommendation, what we're not really taking into account is like, what are you willing and able to do? So here's kind of a couple of baseline sort of facts that I would suggest. And we'll do it in kind of a quiz format. So question one, is it possible to get all of the micronutrients that you need from like a whole food diet? Is that possible?
I guess it depends, but it's probably hard.
Regan says yes. Toko says probably, but it's hard. So the truth is, yes, it is possible, but, and this is sort of where it comes down to like helping people understand, you'd have to eat between 3,500 and 5,000 calories a day in order to get all the micronutrients that your body needs. So you did the math on weight loss yesterday. You were calculating total daily energy expenditure and whatever. Very few people are supposed to be eating 3,500 to 5,000 calories a day, right? Especially if they're trying to lose weight, they need to be in a little bit of a calorie deficit. So it is possible to get all the nutrients that you need from your food, but most people cannot eat that many calories. They would gain weight, right? So then the sort of the anecdotal reality of that is that if you're eating less than 3,500 to 5,000 calories, or if you're eating foods that are more processed and they're not whole healthy foods, right? Well, then the reality is you're going to be deficient in some of those essential micronutrients. A lot of people end up being deficient in essential macronutrients. Like Asif was saying, like protein's really important, and a lot of people don't eat enough, right? Even though there's a range, right? Like 0.8 to live all the way up to sort of 2.2. A lot of people, in order to achieve their goals, they're not eating enough for what they need, right? So if the reality, if the it is possible, but the reality is you really can't afford to eat that much, then at least from a sort of baseline personal trainer perspective, like we want to help people get what they need in a non-caloric way. And that's what a vitamin would do, right? So taking a multivitamin every day gives us the nutrients that we need, regardless of our calorie and micronutrient consumption. So it's usually a really safe and wise recommendation to make that we take a multivitamin, right? Then we could go look at sort of the same thing. We're gonna go back into the slides and look at it. But the main thing for me around supplementation is like a supplement means in addition to. So there's no such thing as an all supplement diet. Like a supplement is what you take after you've looked at your food intake and you figure out what do I need more of, right? So when we look at supplements, the research that we're basing our recommendations off of is very, very big studies done on populations at large and looking at what they're missing, right? So maybe 10, 12 years ago, I went to a course called Lab Analysis, and we actually looked at the blood tests of lots and lots of different people. And we were looking at the levels of vitamins, minerals, hormones, etc. in the blood, right? And then we learned about, okay, well, if you're deficient in this hormone, these vitamins help co-regulate that metabolic process. So then we have to go look at if there's a deficiency in this vitamin. So it was really interesting. It was very clinical. It was very high level. My main takeaways from that whole course were like, wow, pretty much everybody's deficient in something. And the more you're trying to have a performance goal, an athletic goal, the more you're trying to change the shape of your body, the more important it is to get all the nutrients you need. Because if the body is healthy, then we will achieve weight loss or muscle gain or sports performance faster and better than if we're fighting against sort of missing out on some of the nutrients that we need to be healthy. So supplements aren't necessary when a diet is complete, but most people can't eat the number of calories they would need in order to get all those nutrients. And most people don't even have access to the kinds of whole foods that they would need to get that full spectrum, right? Like we're heading into the fall now. So there's a bunch of fruits and vegetables that aren't fresh anymore. So the fact that what's available to us changes how we're getting our nutrients and stuff, okay? So when we look at the general population, again, this is based on probably hundreds of thousands of data points, you see that that very high numbers of people are deficient in these really important nutrients. So 68% of people are not getting enough calcium, 75% of people are not getting enough magnesium, 95% of people don't get enough omega-3. And so then if we have processes in the body that require consumption of these nutrients and we don't have them, well, then those metabolic processes don't get to happen, or they don't happen at the level that we need them to. So again, when we come back to being a trainer, we're sort of looking at generalized recommendations. We see that the minimum recommended servings for fruits and vegetables is 3 to 5 a day. And even though that's the minimum, only about 1 in 20 to 25 people actually get that. And then we look at protein consumption, and we see that 50 to 70% of the average population is deficient in protein. And then again, with omega-3s, 1 in 20 to 25 get enough. And those are really simple things, like fruits and vegetables. Those are your basic carbohydrates, right? Proteins, we need those to repair and grow muscle tissue. Omega-3s are a really important healthy fat. The brain is fueled by a lot of omega-3, and also omega-3s help with managing inflammation. So if we get lower quality fats in our diet, we don't have enough omega-3s, then it can cause all kinds of health issues over time, right? So when it comes to how we might recommend supplements, there's kind of 2 things to think about. There's the essential nutrients, which are like the sort of carbs, proteins, fats, and then there's also the targeted molecules, which get us into all of those little individual micronutrients that we need. So again, coming from kind of a simple place, the essential nutrients, the proteins, the fats, the carbs, the vitamins and minerals, if we were to look at helping our clients first and foremost fill those gaps, if they're not getting enough fruits and vegetables, then we might recommend a vitamin or a daily vitamin or mineral, and or you might have seen like a greens powder, athletic greens or sport greens, or basic greens, and that allows you to take all of these fruits and vegetables and sort of add them into like your shake or add them into your juice or something in powder form. So that can be helpful. When we look at protein, the number of protein powders that are available is astronomical, right? There's lots and lots of them available, and they're made of all different things. There's whey and there's albumin, and there's all the plant-based proteins. So there's lots of different options there. Part of why that can be super helpful is if you think about the cost of a serving of beef versus the cost of a serving of protein powder is actually very economical. So if you have people that say, man, eating healthy is so expensive, well, sure, if you eat grass-fed beef for 4 meals a week, but if you can offset that with some economical protein powder, then that can really help make your food budget less expensive, right? And then when it comes down to omega-3s, I actually just really like encouraging clients to eat fish a couple of times a week. Like, we live in BC, we have access to salmon, right? We're really lucky that way. So I usually like to just say to people like, hey, eat fish like 2 to 3 times a week. But if they don't like fish, or if they can't get it, then okay, fish oil might be a useful strategy, right? So I tend to like to say, hey, food first, and then what's missing, right? So I'll give you an example at this point. I think back to when I was a kid. I was lucky my mom pretty much made all of our meals from scratch. So I would get up in the morning and I have a bowl of Cheerios with some 2% milk, and I'd sprinkle some brown sugar on top. And then I would have a couple of pieces of multigrain toast with, my mom liked margarine. So I'd have some margarine on that, and then I'd sprinkle some cinnamon sugar on top. And that was my breakfast for like 15 years. And then at lunch, I would have maybe a sandwich. Probably I would have a sandwich. Sometimes I would eat like crackers and cheese. Sometimes I might have some leftovers from dinner the night before, but not usually. Like when I was in high school, I was taking like a sandwich for lunch a lot of days. Sometimes I got into eating those little like lean cuisine freezer meals because I would come home for lunch sometimes and I would microwave like a little freezer meal. And then I'd have like a piece of fruit, a yogurt, a Nutri-Grain bar, or something like that, right? Um, when I was younger, my mom would give me milk for lunch, but I didn't like it because I would go to school with my milk in my backpack, and then by lunchtime the milk was warm, so I would pour it out. So my mom was trying to get me to drink milk, and I didn't want to drink warm milk, right? And then maybe after school, I'd have a snack like some fruit or some trail mix or some peanut butter on an apple. I like ants on a log. Do you know what those are, Toko? Ants on a log is like a legit like preschool treat. Like when it's somebody's turn to make the snacks for preschool, like he used to make ants on a log. So it's a piece of celery with peanut butter in it, and then you stick
Oh,
raisins
yeah.
on top.
Raisin on top. Yeah.
I still like ants on a log. I think they're great. So I would have some kind of snack, right? And then I'd go to soccer practice or I'd go to whatever piano lesson, something like that. And then dinner was like meat, potatoes, vegetables, or it was spaghetti with meat sauce, or it was chicken with a salad. Like my mom made dinner every night, right? So that's pretty healthy. It's, I mean, cereal's processed a little bit, but like I wasn't eating Fruit Loops. I was eating Cheerios, right? So pretty good. And I was an athlete. My body performed pretty well. My weight stayed pretty good. When I was a kid, I wasn't really worried about being on a diet or whatever I looked like. That was pretty normal for me, right? But at a certain point as an athlete, I had to then take a look at nutrition being something that would help me perform better. And we learned a little bit about nutrition when we went to university. Our strength and conditioning coach taught a nutrition class at the beginning of every year for all the incoming freshmen. And we were eating at the cafeteria. So now we had more mass produced food. And there was like lots of things to choose from, right? So there was meat, potatoes, and vegetables and salad and all kinds of good stuff. But then there was also like chicken burgers, and there was an ice cream bar, right? They had lots of different things. So if you ate the healthy stuff, cool. But if you kept choosing like the junk food all the time, like if you just had like pizza and ice cream for dinner every day, then you weren't going to perform as well. Maybe you were going to gain some weight, right? So one of the things that I looked at when I first went to school was we weren't allowed to have like a stove or a hot plate or anything. We could have a microwave in our rooms, in our dorm rooms. But otherwise, like as an athlete, you got to go to the cafeteria. So we had practice really early in the morning. So I would get up and I would eat some cereal, and then I would go to practice, and then I'd go to breakfast and I'd have like eggs, bagel, whatever. So then it was like breakfast, lunch, dinner after that. But somewhere along the line, I kind of realized that like, oh, I'm not eating enough protein. So like the cafeteria meals were easier because I could pick protein from what was there, but it was tough because I didn't really have protein in my room. And like those snacks in between, and when we were on the road and when we were in the bus and stuff, it was easier to have like carbs and fats, right? Versus proteins. So I had to kind of get smart and figure out, well, how the heck am I going to get more protein? So then I started buying hard-boiled eggs in the little packages. You like rip open the plastic package, there's a hard-boiled egg in there. And I started eating like 0% Greek yogurt. And I got these little cans of tuna that had lemon juice in them, and you could just eat the tuna straight. And sometimes I would have like turkey pepperoni. Not the healthiest, but it's better than beef because there's less fat in it. Um, and uh, and then I started figuring out things like that, right? And then I also started finding protein bars. That was helpful, right? Because then I could just I was up at 4:30 in the morning to go to practice. I didn't really want to like make eggs, right? So I would just eat a protein bar on my way. And all of those things kind of help. Those are some of the same things that I help recommend for clients: protein smoothie, protein bar, hard-boiled eggs, tuna, Greek yogurt, right? Like the ways that I can just get a little bit more protein into my day in between my meals. So that for me was a really good learning experience. Like at the point where I kind of had to take care of my own food choices instead of my mom making food for me. And that's something that we kind of have to remember with our clients too. Like let's say we're working with someone in their 20s, they live at home. They're probably eating whatever their family eats. And different families make different choices, right? So if you're eating what your family eats, but it doesn't really match up to what you need to reach your fitness goals, then you got to sort of figure some stuff out. When you first, move out and you're living on your own, like maybe your parents taught you how to cook, maybe not. Maybe now you're like, oh, skip the dishes all the time, right? So those are kind of some of the challenges that we're trying to help our clients deal with around nutrition. So again, coming back to the point around where we're at with supplements, if we look at taking a multivitamin, if we have protein powder or some kind of, some kind of extra little boost on protein, if we're not eating a lot of fish, we take a fish oil. Those ones are essential nutrients. Like the body needs these in order to survive. So if you can get them out of your food, that's awesome. But if you can't get it out of your food, you still need to have it. So sometimes that's where we might recommend a supplement as an option. Okay. On the targeted molecules part, this is kind of where we're looking at performance, right? So creatine, glutamine, bicarbonate, beta-alanine, CLA, green tea extract, those would be examples of targeted molecules because they're not directly nutrition-based, but they each serve a purpose. So here's our little activity. I'm going to give you each a targeted molecule, and you're going to look it up. And I want you to record a little video and post it in the group. So Toko, you're going to do creatine. Regan, you're going to do glutamine. And Asif, I'm going to have you do CLA. Okay? So look it up, Google it. Google's interesting because sometimes it gives you facts and sometimes it gives you nonsense, right? So you got to try to make sure you're looking it up from a reputable source. And then film like a 1-minute video, explain what your molecule is, and then post it in the group. I'm going to have, and then I'll give you a thumbs up, or I'll add some extra information based on whatever you've suggested. Okay. I do this for 2 reasons. One, I kind of want you to get into the habit of looking things up when you don't know what they are. And 2, it's useful to know about some of these because they are fairly popular in terms of supplements. So we want to know a little bit more about that. Okay. All right. Now I'm giving a little bit of extra information here. We used to get the request from students. They wanted to learn a little bit more about the supplements, especially the ones that we use with our job partners. Regan, after class. Yeah, you can do it after class or tomorrow, something like that. So I'm going to give you a little bit more information about some of the supplements that we use. There's a little bit up in the air. Fitness World or Steve Nash used to carry a fair bit. And I think they're sort of in the process of sort of reevaluating what they want to do. The complications of where you order it in from, and then the rules in Canada. Canada actually has really, really good rules. They have very high standards for nutrition and supplements. So for example, if you order stuff in from the United States, you have to make sure that that it meets the standards of the Canadian rules. But I'll give you a little bit of information about some of the stuff that I've seen that we use on a regular basis. And the thing for me, again, with clients, I don't want to just say, hey, you have to do this. I want to educate my clients. I want to explain to them, what something is and why I think it could be helpful and how they might use it. So I've come up with, I did this a fair bit in onboarding. When it comes to supplements, or even if it comes to nutritional recommendations that we might make, I want to say what, why, and how, what it is, why it's going to help you reach your goal, and how I want you to use it. So if I can't explain what, why, and how, then I probably shouldn't be recommending it. If I don't really know what it is, if I don't really know why it would be helpful, then I'm kind of just selling it, right? Whereas I want to be recommending something that's necessary and useful. So we'll go through a few of these. I'll kind of give you an example. There we go. All right, so the active multivitamin, .fit is a brand that we use within Steve Nash and Fitness World. So assuming that that partnership extends. Oh, sorry, my cat is lying on my keyboard. That's why the screen keeps flipping around. Are you allowed to prescribe these? The only thing I would change, Regan, is the word prescription. We certainly don't prescribe. But if you go to work for Fitness World, they'll give you an additional certification inside of .fit, and it gives you a lot more information about how to coach on nutrition and how to recommend supplements. So with that certification, it's called .fit Nutrition Coach. With that certification, yes, you're allowed to recommend these supplements, assuming that you use them in the way that the certification recommends that you use them, right? If you decide that you just want to start working with people, you know, at a local gym or out of your house or online or something, your baseline CPT allows you to make recommendations based on Canada's food guide, and there are no recommendations for supplements on Canada's food guide. So if you did not have some kind of additional certification, you could say something like, you know, I take a multivitamin every day because, you know, I'm eating less calories than the number of calories I'd need to take in order to get all of my micronutrients. So I take a multivitamin. That might be something to consider. You know, if you're wanting to make sure that you get all the nutrients you need. So it's more like I can anecdotally have a conversation, or I could reference information that gets put out by somebody that has a higher level of authority than I do. So, for example, Precision Nutrition, they put out a lot of resources that you can actually use with your clients. So even though you're not a nutritionist, you're giving your client a handout that was created by a nutritionist. And so then that's okay to do. So that's kind of the distinction. When you have just your basic CPT, Regan, you can't really act on your own behalf because you don't have the scope. But as a base level CPT, if you give out resources that have been created by people that have higher levels of certification, then that's fine. So it's like, it seems a little silly because you're like, well, if I read that and then I told it to my client, wouldn't that be okay? But it's like, you have to give them what was created by the person who's allowed to do it. You get to sort of be a middleman, but you can't be like, oh, I read something, so I'm allowed to tell you this. No, you have to give them the thing to read, or you have to read it with them or to them or whatever. And that's the stuff that kind of shows up around your liability insurance. If there were to ever be a problem, if someone got sick or something like that, you'd want to just be able to show that you were giving out handouts from a reputable source versus, well, yeah, we just had a conversation about it and I told them that it would be fine, right? That's kind of the difference. We cover a little bit more of the risk and liability stuff when we get into the business section. Okay, so from there, let's take a look at some of these supplements. So again, I'm doing this from inside of my scope as a .fit certified nutrition coach. I'm telling you some of the information that we learn in that certification. So the active multivitamin is a multivitamin for people who work out. So for example, it has a little bit of extra zinc and magnesium in it because when you work out, you use up more of those minerals. So it's a formula meant for active people. In general, a multivitamin ensures that you get the base micronutrients that you need every day. So regardless of your food intake, when you take a multivitamin, you're getting the base minimum amount that you need. So why that would help you reach your goal is because you're reducing your caloric intake a little bit to achieve some weight loss. You already know you're not eating enough calories to be able to get all of those nutrients from your food. So if we take that micronutrient, it's keeping us healthy. It's giving us the nutrients that we need, but it allows us to stay within that desired calorie deficit. So the way that I would recommend using the active multivitamin is the dosage is 2 a day for a healthy adult between, I think, 18 and 55. I'd have to read the label. But it's 2 a day for a healthy adult. So I would recommend take one with breakfast and take one with dinner. So then I'm taking the vitamin with a habit that I already have going on in my regular life. Okay. Super omega-3 is the .fit omega. So omega-3s are naturally occurring healthy fatty acids found in fish. There are also some vegetarian sources. So for example, there's an algae that has omega-3 in it. However, the most common source is fish. Omega-3 is really important for brain function and joint health, and also helps reduce inflammation. So again, if you're not consuming enough of that nutrient in your diet, you still want to make sure that you're getting enough. And what I'd recommend is taking one a day if you didn't consume a fatty fish. So like if you didn't have salmon or something like that with any of your meals that day, then you would take one of these little gel caps of omega-3. Okay. The next slide actually shows a couple of labels, and these are proteins. So one of the things that I noticed over time working with clients is I would say, you know, hey, it's really important to get enough protein. And I'll give you an example. I had a lady who was like, oh yeah, my son takes that. There's a big bucket in the cupboard. I'll just use some of his. So there's lots and lots and lots of different types of protein. And so one of the things that we want to do is be able to read the label. So for example, we're looking here at Whey Smooth and something called the pre-post workout formula. These are both .fit proteins. If we look at the Whey Smooth, right underneath where it says nutrition facts, it says serving size 1 scoop. Okay, so when you open up the bucket, there's a scoop inside. So they're saying approximately 1 scoop. And so in each scoop, there's 150 calories. And if you kind of take your eye down to that third thicker black line, it shows that there's 25 grams of protein. So that would be the Whey Smooth. If we go look at the pre-post workout formula, the serving size is 2 scoops. And in 2 scoops, there's 240 calories. And again, if you drag your eye down to protein, there's 20 grams. So 150 calories with 25 grams of protein is different than 240 calories with 20 grams. Even worse, if the person used the pre-post workout formula, but they only used 1 scoop, well, they'd be getting 120 calories, but they'd only be getting 10 grams of protein, right? So pre-post workout formula is kind of like a middle of the road. It's kind of like a 2-to-1. Whey is sort of a 1-to-1 calories to protein. And then there's a style of protein called like a mass gainer. I don't know, Sif, maybe you take one of those. But it's like a 4-to-1 or a 5-to-2 ratio. So way more calories, more carbs, still obviously a certain amount of protein. But what I experienced with this client was that when she went home and actually looked at the protein that her son was taking, it was a mass gainer, but she's trying to lose weight. So not the right formula for her, right? She was going to be consuming like 480 calories for that 25 grams of protein. Well, that's a third of her intake for the whole day. So what was better for her was to have like the Whey Smooth, because she could have 150 calories, 25 grams of protein. She could add a little bit of almond milk, maybe throw in some spinach or something. And so that was a way better fit for her in terms of her meal plan, right? So when we're looking at protein powders, protein bars, things like that, we've really got to look at the label, right? Not all proteins are created equal. And we want to make sure that we're getting the macronutrient breakdown that makes the most sense for our client. Because again, this is a supplement. They're still going to be eating other food. So then what's the right option for getting them some protein? Okay. I'm going to pause there for a minute. Do we have any questions? Have you had, I don't know if you use supplements, but anything coming to mind that you want to ask questions about? We're handling it. Cool. All right, let's carry on then. Couple more here. These are BioSteel. BioSteel is a Canadian brand. Fitness World has some of that. Whether they continue to use it or not, again, I don't know at this point. But one of the things I like about BioSteel is automatically the whole brand line, no artificial flavors, no artificial sweeteners, no artificial colors. So this would be called like an all natural brand, which some people really like. When you look at supplements, there's different levels of quality. Obviously, the rules in Canada mean that what we sell here is safe, right? As long as it's a regulated brand. But there can be differences in quality. So if you buy a really inexpensive protein powder, often there's a lot of filler in it. And that filler can be something that causes some people to have a little bit of digestive sensitivity. Similarly, artificial colors, artificial dyes, artificial flavors, those aren't really things that the body needs or uses. And so if we consume those in our supplements, the body has to work to get rid of them, right? So I like to try to find things that are more on the natural side. So the High Performance Sports Mix was their first product. We call it HPSM for short. And what it is it's electrolytes and plant-based aminos. So electrolytes, things like sodium, potassium. Electrolytes help us with absorbing water and staying better hydrated, right? And then aminos are the building blocks of protein. So HPSM helps with hydration and also muscle sparing for performance and endurance. So if I'm playing hockey and I'm working really hard, at a certain point, I'm experiencing a little bit of muscle breakdown, right? So if I take a supplement that has a little bit of amino in it, it just helps prevent that muscle breakdown. It might help me perform a little bit better, a little bit longer. And like I said, no artificial flavors or sweeteners in this one. And then Sport Collagen is another one that I like. I've been taking collagen for a long time, just around joint support. But it's become sort of more noticeable in the last couple of years. Collagen helps support connective tissue health. So my tendons, my ligaments, my fascia, those are all made out of collagen. So why this one can be important is because connective tissues actually get next to no blood flow. So when we experience sort of stress or breakdown of connective tissues, the body doesn't really have a lot of nutrients being delivered. And so if we increase the availability of nutrients, it can make it so that we're reducing the sort of breakdown and the aches and pains of training or aging, or if we have any previous injury. So I personally use all of the 4 that I've put up there, actually all 6, the active multivitamin, the omegas. I use Way Smooth sometimes. I use Pre-Post sometimes. I like the blue High Performance Sports Mix, the blue raspberry one. That's my favorite. And then I take collagen every day. So that's an example of some of the types of supplements that are safe and you see them used for the general population. I didn't put up aminos, I didn't put up creatine, I didn't put up glutamine, I didn't put up CLA, like the ones that I gave you to look at. I didn't put those ones up because they're a little bit more specific in their use. But I would say all of these ones are pretty standard, pretty safe. Pretty much everybody could benefit from them. And so those are the ones that you typically see in the gym because we want to sort of give more generalized recommendations for people. Okay? So from there, we take a look and we head into exercise nutrition. We talk a little bit about timing. So the thing to remember here is we've sort of got 2 categories of participants. We've got recreational exercise, where people just pretty much want to look good, feel good, be healthy, right? And then we've got high performance exercise, where we have people training at higher volume, higher intensities. They're looking for maximal adaptation, and what they really need is maximal recovery. So obviously we're going to make different recommendations for those 2 populations. When it comes to exercise nutrition, we really need to have balanced blood sugar. We want to have an energetic mind, comfortable stomach, right? So when we're looking at pre-workout, we just want to make sure that we're sort of fueling ourselves to have a successful workout. When we look at during workout, for most of us, we're going to be running sort of 30 to 60 minute workouts. So we don't really need to have our clients eating, right? But what we want their nutrition to have delivered for them, again, is that balanced blood sugar, focus and concentration. We want them to have a comfortable stomach. And if anything, we're trying to delay fatigue, and we might want to initiate protein synthesis. So I'll give you a great example. Sometimes I get busy in the middle of the day and I don't always eat my lunch. And so if I go to do a workout after work and I haven't eaten my lunch, I feel tired much sooner because I just haven't fueled up my body, right? And then when we look at post-workout, we want to now replenish glycogen. So the energy that we used while we were working out, we want to replenish it. And we also want a positive protein balance so that we can move towards muscle recovery. When it says immune system recovery, what that really means is coming away from that sympathetic nervous system and moving into a more parasympathetic state. So that rest and digest, that rest component is going to be part of where we get some immune system recovery. If we stay super stressed out, then that's taxing to the immune system. Okay. So the pre-workout nutrition strategy, it comes down to what time your workout is in relation to your normal meals. So if you have someone who's going to go from sleeping, getting up, having breakfast, going to work, and they're now going to put a workout in the morning, if they get up and go straight to the gym and exercise, the last time they ate was dinner the night before, and that's actually a fairly long fasting period. So what we might want to recommend for someone who works out early in the morning is like having a little snack. And the closer to their workout that snack is going to be, the smaller and more easily digestible it needs to be. So if I'm going to get up and go to the gym and start exercising and I've got maybe a half-hour window, I might just want to have a piece of fruit, maybe a couple of nuts, maybe even just like that pre-post workout formula that we were looking at. Sometimes if I go work out in the morning, I have 1 scoop of pre-post, not 2, just half the serving. So that allows me to break my fast, and it's going to give me nice stable blood sugar versus me sort of trying to do a workout on an empty stomach, right? So eating normally leading up to a workout, because eating normally is sort of like what fits my life. But if I have to break a long fast, having a little snack, and then also conversely, not eating too big a meal right before exercise. So we remember back from digestion, it takes 4 to 6 hours for the stomach to fully clear a big meal. So I sort of joke around in certs sometimes. I send the students away for lunch. And if I know that we're doing like a workout after lunch, I'll say like, hey, go have lunch, refuel, but like we have a workout after, so don't eat a whole chicken, because then that's too much to digest, right? So we got to think a little bit about the timing. So again, let's say I have a client that eats at 9 and noon and 5, and now they start adding in a workout at 1 o'clock. Okay, well, I don't want you to eat a giant lunch at noon. Maybe have a snack, come work out, and then eat a little bit more after, and then maybe have dinner at like 6 instead, right? So we might have to make some little timing recommendations for people. If you eat too big a meal and then you come work out, you tend to feel sick to your stomach. Maybe you feel like you're going to throw up. So we don't want that. We don't have to clean that up. Okay. One of the other things too is, being careful with the composition of our pre-exercise meal. We want to avoid eating too much sugar. So what you're looking at here is, if you have a meal with a lot of sugar, your blood sugar spikes, but then it drops. And so at the bottom, you can see that the blood sugar is actually dropping when we're first starting exercise. So that's not really going to feel very good. Whereas if we have a meal that's regulated, if it's maybe a little bit of protein, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of fat, something like that, we're going to see that blood sugar stays pretty stable during the workout. And you're also noticing that there's an exhaustion gap. So if I have a high sugar pre-feed, I drop and then I'm sort of trying to recover, but my body eventually hits exhaustion and I have to stop sooner than if I have a lower in sugar pre-training meal. So, we want to recommend timing, but we also sort of want to recommend what it is that our clients are eating. I had a teammate in university who had a kind of a superstition. When we played a game, not practice, but when we played a game, she would always eat a Snickers bar 25 minutes before the whistle blew. So like there's a big clock up on the scoreboard and it's telling you how long until game time. At 25 minutes, she would leave the warm up, go find her bag, grab a Snickers bar, eat it, and then come back into the warm up. And she was convinced that that was like important for her to play. Like she felt like if I ever don't eat it, then I feel tired and slow and groggy and I don't play very well. That's a superstition. That's not nutrition science. So she did it for years. We could never convince her to cut it out. And she was a pretty good athlete, but I always kind of wondered if we had a more blood sugar balancing meal, if maybe that would, she always kind of faded right around 75 minutes. And I wondered if that was because of the Snickers bar. So anyways, then when we look at post-workout, we talked about on the muscle gain page that we want to consume a blend of carbohydrates and proteins post-workout in order to help initiate protein synthesis and start to, build and repair muscle. So the difference here is glycogen dependent versus non-glycogen dependent. So I would suggest the majority of workouts that we run are glycogen dependent because they're either going to be aerobic or we're going to sort of bump up against that anaerobic threshold. So normally the type of workout that we run as trainers is glycogen dependent. So then what we want is some kind of carb protein after, and it's anywhere from a 4-to-1 to a 2-to-1 carb to protein ratio. So again, for people looking to really gain a lot of muscle mass, we might want a 4-to-1 carb to protein ratio. If we've got someone who, did a great workout, but maybe they're trying to lose a little bit of weight, we might want a 2-to-1 carb to protein ratio. If we look at a non-glycogen dependent workout, first of all, can we even think of what that might be? Like what would be an example of a non-glycogen dependent workout or sport? It's kind of harder to figure out, right? That's kind of why I find this slide a little bit funny because there's really not that many of them. But like Toko, for example, doing like a pretty strict powerlifting workout, you're not really doing a lot of reps. You're lifting a heavier weight and then you rest for a while and then you lift a weight again and then you rest and you're really focused on your technique and stuff like that. You're not like huffing and puffing. Your heart rate's not up for like a consistent period of time. So that might actually be an example of a non-glycogen dependent workout. So then you really only need like that 2-to-1 carb to protein. You don't need a lot of carbs. You haven't really burned a lot, right? Regan Pilates or yoga could totally be another one. Yeah, especially if the overall heart rate of the class is quite low. I can definitely think of some power yoga that I want some carbs after. But if the heart rate stays low and we're sort of mostly in a fat burning state because we're below kind of that 60% aerobic, then yeah, that would be another good example. So then in that case, if we haven't used a lot of energy, then we don't really need to replace as much. We just want to make sure that we're getting a little bit of fuel in the body for an appropriate recovery. Okay. So again, with that one, that's where we'd look at the label of the shake or the protein powder that we're using to make sure that it's a strategy that makes sense. So now we sort of come into body composition management. And this is a little bit more the coaching stuff, right? So when it comes to making appropriate food choices, in addition to the drive to eat resulting from hunger signals, there's many internal and external cues that trigger our desire to eat. So for example, if I go to the movies, I want to get some popcorn. It doesn't mean I'm hungry. It's just that going to the movies and eating popcorn is kind of tied together in my brain. So if I go out for dinner and I've eaten all the calories that I need for the day and then I go to the movies, that might be a place where I end up consuming more calories than I need for the day because I want to eat some popcorn, right? Similarly, we've all heard of the term emotional eating, right? So the current internal state, psychological or physiological, can kind of drive us to eat. So if we're having a bad day, we might want some chocolate, or if we're feeling a little bit insecure, nervous at a party, we might want to either eat some food or drink some alcohol, right? And then the middle one, liking, I'll give you a great example. I eat pretty healthy most of the time. I eat a treat when I want. I don't feel compelled to do so. I feel like I manage my food intake really well. But in like February, when they start putting out Easter candy, and all of a sudden those bags of mini eggs are on the shelf, like right at the front of the store. Oh, I buy mini eggs and I eat them because I like them, right? So it's a little bit situational because it's the time of the year, but it's also just like I like them. They're my favorite kind of little chocolate treat. So way back in the day, mini eggs used to come out in April and they'd be around for a couple of weeks and then they would disappear. So that was cool because I would eat a couple bags in April, no big deal. But now they come out in like February, and there's a Halloween version, and there's a Christmas version, and there's the everyday version. So I find that I don't eat the everyday version because it kind of annoys me. Like, it's not Easter, it's not what this is for. But when the Easter version comes out in February, I start eating mini eggs in February. So when I was younger, I ate a couple bags of mini eggs a year over the period of 1 month. And now I eat more bags over the period of 3 months because I like them, right? So that's kind of an example of like triggers, but then also like we make choices around things we like. If you go to someone's birthday party and their favorite dessert is carrot cake and you don't like carrot cake, you probably don't eat a piece of cake, or you eat a small piece because you don't want to be rude. But then if you go to someone else's birthday party and they have a chocolate cake and you're like, oh man, that's my jam, you're probably going to eat a piece. You might even eat two, right? So literally the presence of food that we like means we eat more. So how do we coach our clients around knowing that? Well, this one comes from Precision Nutrition, but I say this to clients all the time. If you buy it and it's in your house, you'll eat it, right? Especially if you're hungry, especially if you've had a bad day, especially if you like it, right? So if you're trying to eat healthier and you're trying to, watch your calories, maybe you want to lose a little bit of weight, then maybe you got to be a little bit more careful about what you buy when you go to the grocery store. So then I say to my clients, don't grocery shop when you're hungry, because then you just buy everything, right? I think in general, it's a good idea to not waste food. So if I buy something, I don't want to waste it and just throw it out. But maybe I got to be a little bit more careful about what I buy, because then I'll eat what's in my house. So if what's in my house is little cans of tuna and some baby carrots and some hummus and apples and trail mix and chicken and all that kind of stuff, I'll eat that. But if I've got potato chips and mini eggs and donuts and ice cream in my house, I'm going to eat that, right? So this idea of willpower, like, okay, there's ice cream in the freezer, but I'm not going to eat it. That's really tough. That's also not really a thing. So this idea of like, you should have better willpower, that's not very helpful. So instead, I think what we want to do is help set up the environment for success, right? And if our clients maybe have a history with emotional eating, we gotta look a little bit at. Sorry, I just got a bunch of pop-up windows. If our clients sort of report that they have some trouble with emotional eating, well, then we want to get a little bit more proactive around how we're going to help them deal with that. But this idea of like, just don't do it. Just, you got to be strong. Whoa, that's not a thing. That also comes across as being like kind of judgmental, right? Like if you can't do it, then you're not a good person. Versus if we just create an environment that sets you up for success, then there's no judgment of you as a person. And I think that can be important, especially where we know people kind of have some stuff going on with food, right? All right. Got some weird pop-ups going on here. I think I pushed a button. Okay, my bad. There we go. All right, cool. Coming back into the deck. Oh, weird. Sorry, technical difficulties. Let me go find my deck. I'm gonna blame Luna. She was sleeping on my keyboard. There we go. Let's see if that worked. Weird. Can you see my PowerPoint, Toko?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see.
Cool. Good. Okay. So with the idea of body composition management, what we kind of have to understand is we've already agreed on energy in, energy out, right? So the number of calories we consume, the amount of energy that we expend. If we look at the energy outside, we've got people that have work-related physical activity or the activity of daily living. Like, you know, if you work in downtown Vancouver and live in downtown, probably you walk a lot. You probably don't drive. So then you've got your sort of daily commute walking. If you're a parent, maybe you're running after your kids and doing all kinds of chores and stuff. Or you have people that are actually just really sedentary, right? Like they drive to work, they sit at a desk, they drive home, they go to bed. So we've got to look at energy out. And in general, we would look at our population and we would say our energy output is decreasing over time as we get more sedentary, as we get more technologically driven, like even just sort of what happened for a lot of people over COVID. Like they either stopped working or they were working from home or they were doing more remote things, right? So, you know, exercise is really important, but if you do 30 minutes of exercise a day and you're sedentary the rest of the time, that's actually not enough, right? And if you do a really intense workout, but then you literally sit at a desk for all of the other hours of the day, that's actually not really good for your body. So we got to think about that a little bit. And I do think fitness is becoming more and more essential because how we educate our clients about movement and exercise and fitness and wellness, I think we are now having to make recommendations that take into consideration the fact that our lives are very different than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, right? So we have to get creative and we have to find ways of supporting our clients to move more and to maintain their health. Then from there, when we look at the energy inside, we sort of have to look at what society has given us at this point. We've got emotional eating that, you know, people are having to regulate and deal with a lot more stress and anxiety and all kinds of things. And sometimes food is the thing that they choose. We also see more high fat and energy dense foods in larger portion sizes and really palatable, low cost, easily available foods. So I had kind of a fun experience. I went and stayed this weekend. I went and stayed at a bed and breakfast estate. So one, I was already teaching in a small, tiny little town. And then two, I stayed at a place like 20 minutes outside of that. And it was beautiful. I was out in a little nature reserve area. There was lots of trees and all the autumn colors. And so it was a bed and breakfast. They give you breakfast, right? Like that's part of your stay. But no, there's no restaurant around. There's no corner store around. There's no fast food around. So on the Friday, when I arrived in the morning, I'd missed breakfast already because I'd flown in on the plane, but I needed to do some work. So I was at the house and there was no food, right? So I had the choice of like driving for say 20, 30 minutes to go find something, which kind of would interrupt my work day. And that wasn't really helpful. or I could just have a tea because there was a little cabinet with tea and coffee in it. So I think sometimes what we don't realize is if we live in urban areas, if we live downtown, if we work in a busy area, there's always a coffee shop and a grocery store and fast food and all of this stuff around us. And so I'll, you know, again, as a personal trainer, let's say I train clients 6, 7, 8, 9 a.m. and then I have a break, and then I train like 12 and 1, and then I have another break, and then I train like 4, 5, 6. These little breaks in between, what do I do? Like, I'm not working, maybe I'm hungry. So maybe we start kind of filling our day with these additional snacks. Maybe we go get a coffee, maybe we get a coffee and a cake pop, you know, whatever. But like what we don't really realize is compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago, where like say a lot of our clients were growing up at that time, right? Like a lot of my clients in their 50s and 60s, they were kids in that time. They didn't have any of this stuff. They didn't have an allowance. They didn't spend money on that stuff. Restaurants weren't really a thing. Their moms, you know, made food. They ate fresh, healthy stuff. And the availability, the low cost, the palatability of everything, like they consume more than they're even aware of. And they consume in very large quantities. And they're not really realizing that that all adds up, right? So that's kind of the battle that we're fighting against is people tend to underestimate the number of calories they eat and they overestimate the amount of energy they burn. And then that's why they end up with weight gain, right? So there's some pretty interesting stuff here that comes back into neurobiology. We look at the reward pathway. The natural rewards are food, water, sex, and comfort or nurturing. So food is a reward, and if we go back and think about you know, caveman or sort of our biological ancestors, the brain is trying to make sure that you survive. So in order to survive, you need food. So if you head over to this, you know, area of the jungle where there's like a banana tree, and you pull a banana off the branch and you eat it, your blood sugar goes up and your brain goes, oh man, this is really important. We got to remember this. So then you get this little hit of dopamine. You get this neurotransmitter reaction to your food consumption. And what the brain is actually trying to do is basically say like, hey, come back here tomorrow and get more food, right? So this idea of the reward pathway is that anything that sort of feeds the brain's survival desires, those patterns are going to get laid in a pretty significant way. But in today's day and age, we have access to food all the time. And we have access to food that's sort of engineered to sort of spike that little reward pathway, right? So a lot of the processed food, a lot of the candy and that kind of stuff, like it's literally designed to hook our brain, right? They're using the biological pathways that they know about to make us more likely to continue consuming these things. So if you think about McDonald's, you know, when you get a McDonald's meal, you get a toy in it. Well, the toy makes you happy, and so then you're like, Mom, let's go to McDonald's. Or if you look at a grocery store, the packages, they're all really bright colors. They've got pictures on them, right? Like there's this game or this app where you look at a logo and you see if you can recognize it. So it's not like the full logo, but it's like the outside shape of it or it's the color of it. Humans are like really good at recognizing that stuff, right? So if I showed you, let's say like a yellow M, you know what restaurant that is. It's McDonald's, right? Or if I show you the face with Colonel Sanders in it, you're like, oh, that's KFC. Or if I show you the orange circle with the A&W, that's not really fair because it's got the word in it. But like, we're really good at recognizing brands. If I were to show you the Trix Rabbit, you're like, oh yeah, that's kids cereal. Like our brain's really good at that. And they do that on purpose, right? So when you go to the grocery store, it's not a bunch of gray packages with tiny little black writing on it. Because you'd be like, what the heck's that? And then you'd pass it by. So they use colors and they use shapes and they use logos and they use animals and they use all kinds of things to try to attract us, to get us to purchase these things. So all of this feeds into the neurobiology, and that's sometimes why it's harder to do a good job of sort of managing intake, right? Like broccoli is really good for us, but broccoli is like this boring green thing. We know it doesn't really taste very good. And so nobody craves broccoli, right? So we kind of got to consider that a little bit. So when it comes to helping our clients manage, the brain approach to emotional eating is an example. Well, first we got to become aware, right? Brain and body awareness. Like, how do I feel? What am I thinking about? Am I noticing that I'm getting into a pattern that's going to eventually lead to eating? And then we want to try to reframe, right? So reframe and avoid emotional hijack, involve others. We're trying to sort of push pause and maybe make a different choice. So those are some of the strategies that you probably followed along on the video. I know, Toko, you were talking about Haruchiba, so I feel like you guys talked about this a little bit. I think what I want to leave you with all of this stuff is, when it comes to working with clients, you know, calories and macronutrients are important, but they're a human being, they're not a robot. And if we want to help our clients achieve sustainable change, we've got to be willing to look at environment and lifestyle, and we really have to educate them. We really have to empower them to make some different choices. So these can be some really good resources to use at the point where you're now starting to work with clients a little bit longer term. If we work with someone in the short term, you know, they want to do a couple of exercises, they want to do a couple sessions to learn some exercise or whatever, we can't really get into this stuff, right? Because it takes time. So I think that these are good things to go back to when, you know, we've earned the right to work with a client longer. Otherwise, sort of the short-term stuff would be things like, you know, portion sizes and trying to prioritize protein and drinking more water, right? So again, it kind of comes back to Canada's food guide. If we're working with someone short-term, then that's kind of the best that we can do. If we're working with them longer term, then we're able to get into some of this other stuff. So a little bit at the end here on eating disorders, we're seeing a higher incidence of people dealing with these and seeking help for them. So we just want to be really clear as trainers that none of this is inside of our scope of practice. Not only is there sort of emotional and mental health stuff related, but also there's some medical needs around nutrition, nutrient absorption, and overall health. And so that goes beyond what we're able to do. So if you have someone that's suffering with an unrealistic body image, or you find that they're severely restricting their intake, if they report that they're, you know, binge eating followed by purging or even extreme exercise, 100% of the time here we would refer out, because this is not our scope of practice. So whether you end up, you know, knowing and collaborating with a nutritionist or a psychologist, or whether you're able to just say to the client, hey, you know, it's really important to me that you're safe and that we're prioritizing your health and your wellness. I really want you to go and talk to someone that can help you with some of the stuff that you're dealing with. We just have to make sure that we're not exacerbating the issue by sort of plugging along, right? Regan, you've been really awesome about sharing some of your experiences. Is there anything you would say about maybe how to help people get some help, or anything that maybe somebody said to you that helped you move on, or anything you would recommend not saying?
Yeah, I don't think it ever fully goes away. Like, I definitely do. Well, I guess I would consider that I do still have orthorexia, but it's very minor now, because it wasn't until this year that I actually gained my weight back. Okay. But still, I found high school very difficult because people talked about weight. Mm-hmm. So I'd say anything to do with like numbers, calories, even if people, when they tell me, oh, you look good, that still triggers me, because in my mind, I think, oh, maybe I look fat. Like, you know, like talking about anything to do with appearance or numbers can actually be very triggering.
Yeah. And like, I like what you said, it never really goes away, because our thoughts and our emotions and our experiences, our memories are all present in the brain, right? So, can I ask you a question? You can answer this you can decide to answer it or not, but do you find that if you're dealing with stress or uncertainty, do you find that it's more challenging to manage eating and exercising in a healthy way? Is that something that you've noticed?
I'd say if I'm stressed, I tend to turn to exercise rather than eating. I still try, like I'm very focused on eating low calorie still. If I can, like I'll turn to low calorie options and I still exercise and work out like several times a day.
Okay, thanks. That's it's always helpful for us to learn more.
Yeah, of course.
Would you say that you might be interested in learning more about this stuff and helping people that have had similar issues, similar challenges?
I'd probably have to like think about it for a while, considering I'm not like fully over my own issue yet, and I'm
Yeah,
still dealing with like a lot of physical issues that are tied to that, like medical issues. So I have to kind of get over that, I think, before I can consider that. But yeah.
for sure. A long runway ahead of you either way, whether you end up helping people with a similar experience, or whether it's better for yourself to move away from that whole body of knowledge and experience. You're the only one who knows. But just kind of for the rest of us learning, you know, uh we just have to listen and pay attention and be open-minded, right? I had a couple of chats with Regan outside of group class, just around, you know, if there's something that comes up that's triggering and you need to talk about it, or you need some support around it, you know, please let us know. But like, it's entirely possible that we will meet and or work with people that have some extra needs, or have the need to avoid certain things. And you know, I don't want to scare you as a trainer. I don't want to paralyze you and make you feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna hurt somebody. But just to be aware of it, right? And so again, if we start by asking questions first, instead of saying this and this and this and this are all the things that I know, then I think we'll be okay. So if you're working with someone new, you ask some questions. I think it's always good to ask a little bit about food and exercise and what your goals are and stuff like that, because it starts to give us some information. And then if there's something in there that we're not quite sure, I always like to say, hey, can you tell me more? Can you give me more information about that? I really want to, I'm really seeking to understand. And so that's sort of just what I would say. That's the place to start from. Okay. Thanks, Regan.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. So when it comes to coaching nutrition, I added this slide in myself, partly because I know that with the Fitness World partnership, there is an opportunity to do a little bit more than a baseline CPT. And also just because I think we're all individuals that eat and exercise too, right? So even if we're not telling other people what to do, I think it can be beneficial to maybe decide on making a few improvements for ourselves. So I kind of have a few bullet points here about just what I think coaching nutrition is all about. So one, we have to support our client in the hours and days beyond the training session, right? Nutrition doesn't happen in the gym in front of us. It happens outside of that time. So if we're going to incorporate coaching nutrition into how we help our clients, we kind of have to have a way of doing that beyond the session. Another thing that I think is really important is elicit client suggestions. So literally the question, what are you willing to work on? Maybe they want to work on portion control. Maybe they want to work on eating more vegetables. Maybe they want to work on reducing alcohol intake. Whatever they choose, I find that it's helpful to really just kind of get behind that and help refine the specific strategies or provide guidance towards healthy and sustainable options. Okay. So if they want to eat more vegetables, then let's ask questions about, okay, how do you think you could incorporate more vegetables into your diet? Well, I think I'm going to order a salad at lunch. And, you know, maybe I could have some like pre-cut vegetables in the fridge for snacks. Great. Awesome. That sounds like a great idea. So anything that they're interested in working on, they're going to be more likely to do it than something you just tell them to do. Okay. Couple other things that I find I say a lot, you know, if I have a client who's wanting to lose weight and they've come in and they've started doing a bunch of exercise, but they're not seeing the weight loss results they want, you know, I sort of bring up, you know, would nutrition be something we could look at to help you get better results? If they say no, then we kind of have to align on the fact that, like, if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? So one of the things that we say is you can't outwork a bad diet. So if you go to a spin class and burn 200 calories and then you go to Starbucks and drink like a 500 calorie caramel macchiato, that's not going to get you where you need to go. But if you go to Starbucks and you get a Americano misto after your spin class, well, that's less than 80 calories. So now we're going to start to get somewhere, right? So if nothing changes, then nothing changes is just kind of a way to maybe open up the conversation. Same with, you know, how's that working for you? So again, where we're working with a lot of adults that have a particular way of doing things, if they're not making changes, they're not getting the results that they want, sort of the idea of like, okay, what you're currently doing, how's that working for you? Oh, well, it's not really. Okay, well, what could we do to make some changes? So then let's say I do get a client that I get to work with over 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, longer. I kind of have some steps that I go through. I sort of think of it like a checklist. Like I have to do this first, and then once they're good at that, then I can move on to this. So number one for me is awareness, and an example of that is logging food, right? So if I have someone who wants to lose weight, but they actually have no idea how many calories they currently consume, well, we might need to look at that. So logging food might be a good strategy. What we'd want to do then is move towards the calorie intake goal, but we're only going to change that by about 250 calories per week. So if they're currently eating 3,000 calories a day and we determine they should be eating 1,800, we probably don't want to go down that much that quickly because they're going to be really hungry, right? So if we started reducing our intake by about 250 every week until we get to where we want to be, we're probably going to feel like that's a more comfortable experience. Similarly, increasing, right? If I have someone who really wants to gain muscle and they should be eating 3,000 calories a day, but they're currently eating 2,000, it's a lot. They're going to feel really full and kind of gross. So similarly, we might only increase by a certain amount each week, right? When we start getting aware and we start, you know, logging our food, we might even be able to move towards an ideal macro split by switching some things around. So you got the macro splits based on looking at the somatotypes, right? So if we have someone who's eating too many carbs and not enough protein, we can maybe switch some things around and try to get that number back in balance. And so all of this can take time. It can take 4, 6, even 8 weeks to kind of figure all of this stuff out. We have to be willing to talk about it a little bit every time we see them. And we have to be willing to follow up and help them make little changes over time, right? We can't just dump everything we know on them on day one and then just expect them to figure it out. So as we work through this awareness process, then we can start to identify gaps and elicit suggestions and even make recommendations to fill the gaps. So again, let's say I'm logging my food for a couple of weeks. I realize I'm not eating enough protein. You know, I might say, hey, you know, Steve, you're looking to lose some weight. You want to build some strength, build a little bit of muscle at the same time. So obviously protein is going to be really important. What's something you could do to maybe get a little bit more protein in your diet? And Steve might say, oh, well, you know, I guess I could try to get some protein into my breakfast because I pretty much have like a bagel and a coffee for breakfast. Okay, cool. I like the sound of that. What types of protein do you think you might want to incorporate for breakfast? And then Steve might say, well, you know what? I could mix up a couple eggs. Great. I like that. Here's a recommendation I can add to that. When you look at the calorie breakdown for eggs, there's about an equal amount of fat and protein. So what I like to do, Steve, is let's say I'm making myself some scrambled eggs. I might crack 2 eggs, but then I'm also going to pour in some extra egg white. And then that gives me a little bit more protein. So for you as trainers, I asked a question, he gave me something he wants to work on, and then I helped him refine it a little bit. And I'm sort of trying to give him a hint that's going to allow that to be more successful. But the key was he came up with the first suggestion. So now he's open to what I have to say instead of me just telling him something right off the bat. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. So when it comes to supporting our clients, well, maybe that's things like different recipes or helping them build out a grocery list or helping them make different choices when they go out to eat. So for example, can you get a salad instead of fries? Can you hold the cheese? Can you ask for the dressing on the side, right? Things like that. And then we throw supplements in there as well, because that might be something that they might need. Again, just around understanding that most people are going to get into some kind of caloric deficit usually when they're working with us. At bare minimum for me, a multivitamin and a protein powder is probably going to be really helpful. So we might start to make those recommendations. Now, all of that, those first two steps, awareness and identify and make recommendations, again, that can take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Over time, as we continue working with somebody, we might talk about quality, variety, maybe helping them cook more of what they eat instead of eating out so much. Getting curious, exploring, trying new things, right? Like the idea here is sort of sustainability and longevity, right? So I think everybody maybe gets to a point where they start doing meal prep, right? And they chicken, rice, broccoli. And that can be helpful for a while because it makes it simple. But I don't know that people really want to do chicken, rice, and broccoli for years on end, right? There's definitely other things you can eat and still be healthy. So over time, where we might want to simplify at first, over time, what we probably want to do is like expand it and open things up again. Because otherwise, chicken, rice, broccoli, maybe that gets boring, maybe they quit. So if we don't teach them other ways to be healthy, then they go back to things that maybe aren't so healthy. And then that means that they can't get the results they want or they can't maintain the results. So the longer we're working with someone, the more we can expand on how we're coaching them, right? So I think that's one of those things. If you get someone who's like, yeah, I just want to do like 4 workouts, figure out a workout routine. Okay, I'm not going to be able to talk about quantity, variety, meal prepping, right? Like in 4 sessions, I might be able to say like, hey, it's, if we're reducing calories a little bit, maybe let's look at some portion size stuff. Like at bare minimum, I'd recommend a multivitamin and, maybe let's get a protein shake in there, right? That's kind of all I can do in 4 sessions. But then if they come back to me and they work with me again, then maybe we can touch base on nutrition again. So it's very parallel to the process of working with them through training sessions. Here's sort of where I leave off. I think about the fact that, a lot of times people think about getting recommendations on their nutrition from, say, their doctor, right? Like a doctor should be able to say something about nutrition. But how often do you see your doctor? I haven't seen a doctor in years. I have some older clients, maybe they see their doctor every 3 months, and that's a lot. But they see me like twice a week. So who's going to be better able to support them in making some changes to nutrition and lifestyle? The doctor or me? Like I see them all the time, right? So I got to maybe go get educated or get an extra certification, but from the perspective of like actually making a difference in people's lives, doctors are important, but like people typically only go to doctors when things are going very, very wrong. And the doctor sees them like one time and writes them a prescription, and then, you should get better in a couple of weeks. Making lifestyle changes, making nutrition changes, sort of the progression of exercise over time, that's not a once in 3 months or once a year kind of thing. That's why we do things differently, right? So I do think if we take a little bit of ownership over the influence that we can make, if we educate ourselves and we get the certifications that allow us to do that safely, I think we can make a really, really positive impact on people. And that's literally gonna change and even save somebody's life at a certain point, right? So I think what we do is really important. And I think if we ally with doctors and physios and chiros and all that stuff, then we're often the people that are sort of on the ground day to day, able to make those sort of supportive changes on a more regular basis. All right, so that's the nutrition section. Let's take a pause. Does anybody have any questions on any of the nutrition stuff or anything that I didn't bring up? No. Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break because that was 2 hours. Let's take a 5-minute break, give you guys a chance to do some jumping jacks or go to the bathroom, grab a snack, whatever. I do want to at least start on a little bit of the business stuff today because those of you that are coming to Fast Track over the weekend, we won't be doing a dedicated day of content. You'll be in the 2-day accelerated learning review mix. So if we talk about a little business today and then we do a little bit of business Tuesday next week, I might even just do a Thursday next week so that we can sort of hit business on 3 days. But I don't want to not do any tonight because then we'll just have a whole lot more to cover. So let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and we'll start off the business. I'm actually going to turn off the recording and then start a new one so that it's not like a 3-hour long video.